Welcome to another broadcast from mindyourhealthcast.com. Well, we're going to conclude today what we began in the last broadcast, which was a discussion of vitamins and minerals. Are they really necessary? As you probably know, there's all kinds of theories, attitudes, discussions regarding the importance of supplements and even diet. Some people think as long as you can chew it up and swallow it, it's going to be okay for you. And other people, of course, go to extremes of eating maybe a mono diet of one type of thing, or various approaches across the spectrum. So basically, we've gotten to a period of where the prevailing practice is do what you want. And if something happens, if you start feeling bad, or if your body starts to get downhill, if your heart is about to quit, if you develop a big tumor, well, medicine somewhere down the road, if not today, is going to come up with the magic pill or the magic procedure that's going to take care of everything, and in the meantime, you can continue. It's interesting to me how much people hang on to their tastes that they've developed over the years and their dietary habits to the point that some would be willing to give up their life rather than change their lifestyle, especially the diet. I still can recall, and I may have mentioned it before, but if so, I'm going to mention it again anyhow because it fits in with what we're talking about. One of my patients had a very good family friend who developed cancer. And of course, he wanted the latest scientific treatment. And he went through the surgery, the chemotherapy, the radiation. And then, lo and behold, one day the doctor said, well, you just have about 1 to 2 weeks left to live, and there's nothing more we can do. This patient of mine, who was such a good friend, decided they would go and suggest to this gentleman that he might want to look into a different type of therapy, in as much as he had exhausted the scientific medicine and now was on his deathbed. So they went over and talked with him, and they said, well, have you considered some type of a natural medical approach? And so he got this kind of questioning look on his face, and he says, oh, yeah, that's the one where you have to change your diet. No, I wouldn't be interested. And he wasn't interested, and in a week or two he died. And they were very upset, and they said, how could somebody be on death's door and not even be willing to change their diet, let alone look for some other natural approach? And it's kind of like I've heard the statement made before, well, I've lived with my doctor, and I guess I'll die with my doctor, when they weren't getting well from some degenerative fatal ailment. And that's their choice. You know, we live in a country, supposedly at least, in theory, that we have choices. We have choices as to all kinds of things, whether we want to make good decisions, bad decisions, or otherwise. That's what a land of liberty provides. If you want to make bad decisions and you want to destroy yourself in the process, basically, in the land of freedom, that's your choice. However, if you want to be healthy, now we're talking a different story. And so some of the things that we've talked about in the last broadcast and that we'll conclude today are very useful if one is so inclined to look in other directions. Then there's ample information. I mean, no one can claim ignorance today. With everything that's being written, I mean, the millions of books, the internet that you can search any place in the world, all of the enlightenment that we have there really is no excuse for being ignorant if you really want to know the answer, or at least some of the answers, and make your own decision. However, it seems that people, more often than not, will just trudge along. And I've always liked that word, trudge. We just kind of trudge along, ignoring what's going on beside of us. And sometimes I refer to it as the Magoo complex. And from the cartoon character, which I guess we don't hear much about anymore, with the big thick glasses, could hardly see. And so in each episode that they would show him, he would almost be destroyed or killed or something, at least seriously injured. But because his sight was so bad, he didn't realize it, and ultimately when he got to where he was going, he'd say, Magoo, you've done it again. And so a lot of people do. They trudge, and again, that's their right. But if you want to be healthy, or if you want to live healthy longer, there's some considerations that you have to look into. And if you want to avoid some of the serious illnesses, there's things that you might want to look into. The time to keep your house from burning down is not when it's on fire, but doing things to prevent it from catching on fire in the first place. And we would do that. We would be more inclined to protect our car or to protect our house than we would our own health, it seems. And the reason I say that, after pushing 40 years of being in the natural health field, I have seen that happen. People would much rather spend their money for a nice vacation, or to buy a new vehicle of some sort, or to go places, attend Super Bowl, whatever it is. Those become more important, and they never would complain because the price of the ticket for the Super Bowl is too high. They would complain, however, if attempting to change your diet and maybe spending a little more for good food, or maybe some supplementation, as is our topic of discussion. Yeah, that's too much money. And I've seen families do that when they said, "No, I can't get very much because I can't afford it," and then find out that the whole family left for a 2-week vacation in Europe. So it just depends on where you want to spend your money. And again, getting back to what I said earlier, this is the land of the free, and so that's your choice. However, it's not so good to complain once you've made the choice if you don't like the outcome, because the outcome is as predictable as many other things, although we may not like to think it. Our problem, I guess, is with the health issue, that as long as we're able to get about and carry on our life in relative comfort, we don't want to have to be concerned with our health in terms of watching what we eat or doing things to encourage good health. We feel that as long as we're functional, then everything is okay. And of course, if we get this happen and that happen, if we can go and get that magic pill or that magic procedure, then we're going to be fine. And only when one day the doctor comes out and says, "Oh, you have metastatic cancer. It has spread all over your body." And then you say, "Well, gee, how long do I have to live?" Well, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, depending what the situation is. And at that time, you get a dose of stark reality. Wow, maybe I should have done things a little differently. But as long as we can continue to function reasonably well, we think everything's okay. And as long as we can take a pill to take away the symptoms that are telling us something isn't right, we're happy with it until that crucial day. And sometimes we don't get a chance to think about it. I've said it before, and it's come from good sources, that about 52% plus or minus of the people with a serious heart problem, their first symptom is death. And an acquaintance of mine in Illinois had that happen out of the blue. Sat down to eat dinner at a restaurant with his wife, and they received their salad, and actually it wasn't too bad a meal comparative wise, but he did not take as good a care as he should. Anyhow, after eating a few bites of his salad, he collapsed on the floor. They were sitting at a booth and he fell out on the floor, and they were 5 minutes from the hospital. They were right in the downtown, right next to the hospital. They immediately called the paramedics, which were there in a minute or two. They were nearby. They rushed him over to the hospital. His wife drove the car over to see what was going on, and they met her as she came walking in and said, "I'm sorry, he's gone. He had a massive heart attack." Up to that time, he had no indicators, no symptoms. It's just, there it was. And so it's insidious in that it's going on in the background, but for many years we're able to mask it by turning off all of those alarms as they turn on, until finally one day it is there. It's now a reality. And now the cancer, now the heart attack, now the plugged up arteries, now all those things that we've heard about and read about, but think surely it couldn't happen to me because I feel fine. Anyhow, it leads me to the fact that I get a lot of patients after the first critical mass hits, and but it didn't take them out. Then I am presented with the problem of bringing them back to some reasonable form of health, and it's much more difficult at that level. So, why number one, should we be concerned? Why is diet an issue? Well, we're going to turn to the big guns first. I have here a very thick report, probably 150 to 200 pages, somewhere in that range, about 160 maybe. And this was a report that was put out in 2003. A big conference took place in Geneva, Switzerland, from two groups. One, these were experts gathered together by the World Health Organization and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. And so they spent a few days, these experts did, presenting what they saw as issues that we have to deal with related to health. And so they called it Diet, Nutrition, and the Prevention of Chronic Diseases. You know, we hear the word prevention thrown around, but we don't see too much prevention that's actually being done. It's more crisis after the fact type things, not getting our situation straightened out such that we don't have to face that crisis. That takes a lot of work, a lot of determination, and in today's world, denying ourselves sometimes of some of the garbage that's available out there, and not a lot of people want to do that. They would rather just do what they want to do and eat what they want to eat, and then hope for the best. And again, hoping that medicine is going to bring out that magic wand at the end and wave it and everything will be fine again. But I guess if you do that, you kind of believe in fairy tales, because here's a group of experts from around the world who gather together. And of course, the World Health Organization and the Food and Agriculture Organization have to put this caveat. Now, these are experts, they gather together. This report contains the collective views of an international group of experts and does not necessarily represent the decision of the stated policy of the World Health Organization or the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So, it's not a bad report, actually. it's interesting what they came up with in light of what's going on today. So, they start out in the introduction by saying, furthermore, right after talking about who they are, why they're there, furthermore, rapid changes in diets and lifestyle that have occurred with industrialization, urbanization, economic development, and modern globalization, market globalization, have accelerated over the past decade. Okay, so this was actually published in 2003, so over the last 10 years, these are some more dramatic things that have happened. This is having a significant impact on the health and nutritional status of populations, particularly in developing countries and countries in transition. While standards of living have improved, food availability has expanded and become more diversified, and access to services has increased, there's also been significant negative consequences in terms of inappropriate dietary patterns, decreased physical activities, increased tobacco use, and a corresponding increase in diet-related chronic diseases, especially among poor people. Now, they go on to say, because of these changes in dietary and lifestyle patterns, chronic non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, including obesity, diabetes mellitus, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, stroke, and some types of cancer are becoming increasingly significant causes of disability and premature death in both developing and newly developed countries, placing additional burdens on already overtaxed national health budgets. Okay, so they're recognizing that there is a problem. And the problem has to do with diet and nutrition. And the reason it's a problem is because the wrong diet and nutrition can lead to what? The list that I just mentioned, the biggies. Cardiovascular problems, actually neurological, I don't know that they mentioned that. Cancer, diabetes, all kinds of degenerative problems have all come about. Now they kind of lump all that under chronic disease. Actually, I know that even acute issues are dealt with better by the body if the body has proper nutrition or has the nutrients it needs to function well. But they're dealing mostly with the idea of these serious chronics because these are the big money eaters. When you have people with these type of problems, you know, we're talking treatment for the rest of their life. No matter how short or how long it is, during that time, it's very expensive to treat all of this. And of course, organs degenerate, and when organs degenerate, now they're into transplants, and transplants are not cheap, not only to carry out, but to maintain after they have been transplanted. You know, most people think it's like a walk in the park. You just walk in, they put you in a new organ, you walk out, and you live happily ever after. Well, it doesn't quite work that way, and we've done videos before on organ transplants, and if you're interested in some of the things that are happening, you might want to go and listen to or watch those videos. Okay, so nutrition is coming to the fore as a major modifiable determinant of chronic disease. Now, I didn't say that. This is a select committee of experts from around the world. Nutrition is coming to the fore as a major modifiable determinant of chronic disease. What are they saying? Chronic disease is a result of poor diet and nutrition. I don't know if that clicks or not, and I don't think a lot of people want to think about it, but there it is. These are top experts in the world, with scientific evidence increasingly supporting the view that alterations in diet have strong effects, both positive and negative, on health throughout life. Wow. These guys have really keyed into something. In a minute you'll see there's nothing new, been known for a long time, but nobody wants to be bothered with it. And here's what they said, scientific evidence is increasingly supporting it. No, it's not just hearsay, and it's not the opinion of a few crazy health nuts. This is what experts from around the scientific world are saying. Most importantly, dietary adjustments may not only influence present health, but may determine whether or not an individual will develop such diseases as cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, much later in life. However, these concepts have not led to a change in policies or in practice. In many developing countries, food policies remain focused only on undernutrition and are not addressing the prevention of chronic diseases. You know, it's some pretty good stuff. I mean, I didn't say it. Here we're talking about a group of world experts. And they're from the scientific community. They're not from some nutritionist on the corner who we say, well, what do they know? And besides that, everybody knows that that's not that important. Diet, nutrition, and chronic diseases in context. The diets people eat in all their cultural variety define to a large extent people's health, growth, and development. Risk behaviors such as tobacco use, physical inactivity modify the result for better or worse. In other words, those add to already whatever good or bad results you're getting from your diet and the food you eat. All this takes place in a social, cultural, political, and economic environment that can aggravate the health of a population unless active measures are taken to make the environment a health-promoting one. Boy, this is some pretty good stuff. I think this ought to go in a textbook on nutrition for alternative health practitioners. Diet, nutrition, and the prevention of chronic disease through the life course. Now, the rapidly increasing burden of chronic diseases is a key determinant of global public health. Already, 79% of deaths attributed to chronic diseases are occurring in developing countries, predominantly in middle-aged men. In other words, these other countries, as they're coming up, are going to the same practices that we've been doing for a while, and here's what's happening to them. There's increasing evidence that chronic disease risks begin in fetal life. Intrauterine. In other words, it's important what's going on with the mother who's carrying a new life. And continue into old age. Adult chronic diseases, therefore, reflect cumulative differential lifetime exposures to damaging physical and social environments. I don't know, that's, I say, pretty strong stuff. We'll go to one more quotation. In conclusion, it may be necessary to have three mutually reinforcing strategies that will have different magnitudes of impact over differing time frames. First, with the greatest and most immediate impact, there is a need to address risk factors in adulthood and increasingly among older people. Risk factor behaviors can be modified in these groups and benefits seen within 3 to 5 years. Oh, you mean it's going to take some time? You don't have that magic bullet, that magic pill, you just take it, everything is finding it. With all populations aging, the sheer numbers and potential cost savings are enormous and realizable. Wow, look at the money we could save. Look at our health bill in this country. I shouldn't say health bill, it's our sickness bill. Look at our sickness bill. When you get up in the trillions, we can't afford it. We can't pay it. And so what do we have to start doing? We have to start withholding treatment from people after they reach a certain age because it's not cost effective anymore. We have to dump it all into the younger people coming up so they can produce during their production years, and then once they're past a certain point, we kind of let them fade off into the sunset because we can't afford it. But it takes time. It takes time to see change. You mean tomorrow, if I start taking a good diet or eating a good diet and taking some good supplements, I'm not going to be better tomorrow or next week? 3 to 5 years. With all populations aging, the sheer numbers and potential cost savings are enormous, yeah. Secondly, Social changes toward health-promoting environments need to be greatly expanded as an integral part of any intervention. In other words, you've got to educate people why this is important. Ways to reduce the intake of sugar-sweetened drinks, particularly by children, and of high-energy density foods that are micronutrient poor, as well as efforts to curb cigarette smoking and increase physical activity, will have an impact throughout society. Such changes need the active participation of communities, politicians, health systems, town planners, and municipalities, as well as the food and leisure industries. Thirdly, the health environment in which those who are most at risk grow up needs to change. Oh, well, yeah, we could prevent that if we started getting people changing their diet and eating healthy and giving them some real food along the way. It would make a tremendous difference. It's very cost effective. There is a more targeted and potentially costly approach, but one that has the potential for cost-effective returns, even though they are longer term. That's what they're saying. That's what this is. It's cost-effective in the long run, but in the short run, it takes a lot of major change, and it's probably going to cost a little bit, not only in time, but in terms of changing attitudes and education. Anyhow, it's a very good report. You can find it. It's free. And they go into more details. I'm giving you just the consensus of it. And so, now we say, wow, isn't this novel? Look what they've discovered. Look what the scientists have come up with. Well, guess what? Nothing new. It's been known for a long time and nothing's been done. In fact, everything that was done when it was known originally was counteracted by big financial interest in the food processing and growing industry and in the pharmaceutical industry. They were making so much money from doing what they were doing, they certainly had no interest in it. You know, and it's interesting, even the hypocriticalness of it, because I can remember back when pharmaceuticals were telling people that they were throwing their money away, they were buying expensive urine by buying supplements and taking them, because it was a waste of time. All you had to do was just eat the food that's provided and everything would be fine. You didn't need all that stuff. And besides, it could be dangerous, who knows? At least our pills, you know, we tell you in advance it could kill you. And you're willing to buy it, so that's okay. But, you know, you got to be careful. You shouldn't be throwing your money away from that. You should be saving it so you can buy some more drugs. And so they had that song going for years. I remember it. But guess what? Unfortunately, some people who began to get a little bit educated began to realize that there was something wrong and that medicine wasn't fixing it. And so they didn't want to get sick. Well, it's nice to have a magic pill when you get sick to make you feel better, which of course does not make you healthier. It only makes you not know how sick you are. But all of this other stuff, it was a waste. But some of these people realized that that was the case. And so what they started doing is they started buying food supplements anyhow. We call them food supplements, vitamins, minerals, a lot of terms, and we'll try to clarify that just a little bit before we're done here. And so the pharmaceuticals finally realized that now, as it was developing, more and more people were doing this. That was money coming out of their pot after a while. Now, at the beginning, a few $1 million a year going for food supplements to a few health nuts, that's nothing. That's pocket change to a company that takes in billions of dollars. But whenever it started to get into the billions, that's coming out of their pocket. More than just change, it's the big bills are starting to come out. And so, guess what they did? They did a turnabout. You know what? They don't really care what you take as long as they make profit on it. I found that out a long time ago, and if you haven't learned that yet, the big pharmacy industry wants to make lots of money. Now, if you're going to be spending your money for supplements, which they've been saying all along was a waste of your money and creating expensive urine, now all of a sudden, out of the blue, one of the pharmaceutical companies starts advertising on television, well, we have come out with something really good. We have a multivitamin mineral. What do you think of that? Because everybody knows you should take vitamins. Well, where did that come from? Where everybody knows. Yeah, everybody was learning, and they weren't making the money on it. So what I learned is they don't care what you buy and what you take as long as they make a profit on it. So if you want to take vitamins, we'll give you vitamins. However, caveat, the vitamins that they're giving you basically are synthetically produced vitamins, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Hence, they are of poor value in the body. Now, at this point, I have to tell you that the body is very determined to stay alive. And it will do a lot of things and even sacrifice certain less important parts to preserve those key parts that keep you alive, like the heart and the brain. You can't stay alive without those. And then along after that is the liver and kidneys and so forth. So, but it will sacrifice a foot or an arm, or sometimes other areas if necessary to stay alive. So, if you put poor quality vitamins and minerals in the body and your body is deficient, guess what? It's going to try to make some use out of them if at all possible. And it's going to expend some energy to do that because it has to convert them into usable forms. And so, some people who took no vitamins, you give them even a junk vitamin mineral combination, and they're going to feel a little better with it. That's true. And that's basically who they were hitting, the people who were taking drugs, and they trust their pharmaceutical company. So if they come out with a supplement and they say, wow, this is good stuff, of course you're going to jump in and take it, if that's what you believe in. Now, I know that these synthetically generated vitamins perform very poorly in the body. I've watched over the years, I've watched it change, I've watched the people's health, taking those versus taking something with high quality value that the body can easily utilize for making energy, rebuilding, and carrying on all the functions it needs to carry on. But nonetheless, they put it out and made lots of money on it because they can put some pretty big ads out there and they can afford it. And when they put a national ad out and spend $1 million or $2 million or more for it, they're making lots of money because they're charging a good dollar for their synthetic vitamins, but it costs them almost nothing compared to what it would cost to produce a high quality supplement. But some people were enamored by it. But what's interesting, because they're synthetic, because they're manufactured molecules, as I say, the body has to work hard to utilize them, and guess what? If you take too much of it, the body cannot process it and it becomes toxic. Very rapidly, actually. And it's interesting because the warnings that they've had about fat-soluble vitamins, like vitamin A and vitamin D in particular, and E, the studies they did were on their own synthetic vitamins. And guess what? Didn't take long to reach toxic level. I've seen vitamin A in a natural emulsified form go up to 1/4 to 500,000 units a day in somebody extremely sick and not poison them at all. But if you went up to 25,000 international units of synthetic vitamin A, it would be beating your liver up and could become extremely toxic and possibly even fatal. So it's not that the body won't try to use them if at all possible, but at the same time, you have to be careful what the limits are. And as I say, pretty much the toxicity studies have all been done on synthetic vitamins. So that makes a problem. And they try to, when somebody does some study with high quality supplements and then they try to duplicate it with regular medicine, they don't use the high quality supplement, they use the synthetic material that they've developed, and their outcome is, well, yeah, it didn't seem to do that much. Well, of course not, because it's not the same thing. And sometimes, however, they ride on what has been done by those people utilizing high quality products, and then sell their junk and say, here, this is a multivitamin, and has, oh, it has some minerals in it too. I mean, this is high quality. And of course, if you look at the mineral compounds, like copper sulfate, for example, which I don't think I'd want to take it at all, but that could be a source of copper. Pretty much, if you look at the elements that are used, you can tell that they're chemical compounds by the wording that they use in the label. And that's a lesson in itself. It's probably a bit beyond what we're going to have time for today, but it's certainly something to consider. Now, I said that this report that has come out by the expert panel put together by WHO and the agricultural group, it sounded like a new revelation, but I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. Way back in 1936, the U.S. government printing office produced a document, and it was called Modern Miracle Men. I mentioned it before. It was based on an article written by a journalist who was watching the work of a group of doctors who had discovered that all of the new diseases that were coming about were really deficiency problems, and that the soil and the food were deficient. And so when they started working to correct soil and grow good food, people's health improved that were utilizing that. And the people who were doing it right along, they found were not getting sick all the time, and hence in need of another miracle drug. And these people didn't get a lot of notoriety. And the reason this document came about, and you can still find it, all you have to do is look on Google and look for Modern Miracle Men article, and you can bring up the document and print it out for yourself. As I said, everything I tell you, you go look it up yourself. You don't have to believe me. And this article was written by this journalist, Rex Beach was his name, and it's relating to proper food mineral balances by Dr. Charles Northern, who was a medical doctor at the time, and it had originally appeared in the magazine The Cosmopolitan in 1936. So as soon as they read this before the U.S. Senate, they said, we need to print this up and make it available as a government document, and it was document number 264. As I said, I don't think you can get it from the government printing office anymore, but there were so many copies around that somebody has made them into a PDF, and so you can get your own copy still. And it says, this is the introduction to this article, Dr. Charles Northern, who builds health from the ground up. This quiet, unballyhooed pioneer and genius in the field of nutrition demonstrates that countless human ills stem from the fact that impoverished soil of America no longer provides plant foods with the mineral elements essential to human nourishment and health. To overcome this alarming condition, he doctors sick soils and by seeming miracles raises truly healthy and health-giving fruits and vegetables. And then he says, did you know that most of us today are suffering from certain dangerous diet deficiencies which cannot be remedied until the depleted soils from which our foods come are brought into proper mineral balance? The alarming fact is that foods, fruits, and vegetables and grains now being raised on millions of acres of land that no longer contain enough of certain needed minerals are starving us no matter how much of them we eat. Laboratory tests, now he just wasn't guessing this. Laboratory tests prove that the fruits and vegetables, the grains and eggs, and even the milk and meats of today are not what they were a few generations ago, which doubtless explains why our forefathers thrived on a selection of foods that would starve us. No man of today can eat enough fruits and vegetables to supply his system with the mineral salts he requires for perfect health because his stomach isn't big enough to hold them, and we are getting running to big stomachs. Leading authorities have found out that 99% of the American people are deficient in these minerals, and that a marked deficiency in any one of the more important minerals actually results in disease. Okay, so there you have it. Way back in 1936, they already knew. It was no big secret. They knew then. Now, why did they get into this? I've mentioned before, the doctors at that time that really wanted to get people well noticed that all of a sudden there's this big upsurge of cardiovascular problems. Cancer, which in some of the older medical books, cardiovascular problems weren't even in there because they weren't a problem. And cancer was so seldom that you didn't find a whole lot about it. And so forth. And I know neurological degeneration, gastrointestinal problems, diabetes, all these things. Hardly anybody had diabetes. It was a real rarity. But all of a sudden, all this stuff is popping up, and these doctors saying, what's wrong? What's going on? I mean, we're becoming enlightened people. Technology is improving. Why are we getting all of this problem developing? And so when they started looking into it, this is what they found out. So it's nothing new, been known for a long time, and I've mentioned before that even once the cancer started developing, there was a whole approach to cancer all the way up into the 50s that involved changing of diet and nutrition for the treatment. As I mentioned, I have the actual book that was written about it, meaning that they used, that told the plan to get people well, because what they did is they put back the things the body was missing so it could do what it's supposed to do. So that's the problem. Okay, so now, have we fixed it today? I don't think so. Not that there's not some people trying. There's a lot of information available, and on smaller scale, a lot of people are getting involved, trying to improve, but it takes a lot of work and determination, and the results are not like tomorrow. You take a couple of vitamins pills and tomorrow you're great, or you eat some food grown organically and tomorrow you're great. The body has to rebuild, because every time you're missing certain elements, things don't work right in your body. They shut down. So here we are developing very expensive drugs to turn off symptoms that have to do with nutritional deficiencies. Now think about that. I still think that it's not clicking. Nutritional deficiencies are causing the major causes of death that we are spending a fortune on to try to keep the people alive by giving them pills to turn off the symptoms as long as we can until it's too late. I don't know if that rings a bell yet or not. That is the big problem. The problem is prevention, especially, meaning if you're getting the right things all along, you don't have the problem. Now, I could give you piles and piles of documentation, and it's interesting because here's something that Linus Pauling said, who was criticized over his vitamin C stuff. But he received 2 Nobel Prizes. You can trace every sickness, every disease, and every element to a mineral deficiency. Now, we get back to this mineral thing. Here's some studies. This is research stuff. Prevalence of micronutrient deficiency in popular diet plans. here's some studies done by, quote, scientific studies that show that the diet plans, I think I read some stuff about that before, the diet plans that are put out are so poor in nutrition, the way they're put together, that in many cases you have to eat pounds and pounds of food to try to balance the basic nutrients that you need to be getting out of food. Now that is a lot. I mean, we're talking a lot. I read it before, but we're not going to take the time to read it, but there was a whole study done on it, that the diet plans, what they were utilizing, were terrible. Dirt poor, have fruits and vegetables become less nutritious. This was in Scientific American. The mineral depletion of foods available to us as a nation from 1940 to 2002. Now, it's interesting because they actually name specific minerals. Now, as I said before, vitamins are important, and the body has a lot of capability of building and converting things. And vitamins it can do in a lot of cases. However, minerals have to come from the food or supplementation because the body can't make minerals. It has to get them from food and the soil, or you have to supplement them. So, Northern had already found in the 1900s, early 1900s up into 1930s, about this depletion of minerals or nutrients. And here's a study called The Mineral Depletion of Foods Available to Us as a Nation from 1940 to 2002. And they're showing the change since that period of time. So here we have sodium, 24% less in 2002 than in 1940, which was already low. Remember, Northern had found there was a problem back then. So now, we're talking 24% less sodium, 9% less potassium. Why do you think that's the case? Well, you know that the growers found that if they didn't put a few key things in, the plants wouldn't grow at all in depleted soil. So they had to do something to get them to grow. And so they found that if they put nitrogen in, and they put some potassium in, and some phosphorus, they could get a plant to grow. Regardless of all the other minerals are very few or not at all. They'll grow. Are they good? Are they nutritional? Do they help us get healthier? But it will grow and it will look like a plant. But the difference is if you test the plant or you taste it, anybody who's ever tasted real food with real nutrients in it, and especially minerals, are going to say, wait a minute, this isn't food, this is fiber with some coloring and water, but there's not much in it otherwise. And I can tell that because in my early life I had real food, and I still remember what real food tastes like, and I hardly ever can buy even organically grown food that is nutritious. And I've tested it, and it's almost totally deficient. I look at a nice piece of fruit, a nectarine, says it's grown organically, and I bite into it, and it's flat. No taste. And where does the taste come? From the minerals. That's what our bodies pick up as being important to our welfare. That's why we have a desire to eat, and that's when our desire to eat is satisfied, is when the food that we eat has in it nutrients that satisfy that taste for real food. You know, nature put everything together to work together, and if we listen to nature, we would know whether we're getting good food or we're not. Wouldn't even have to test it in the lab. All you gotta do is take a bite of it. But you have to really taste real food first. But all these, 24% less, 9% less potassium, and incidentally what they found was when you put only 1, 2, or 3 nutrients in, or a couple of minerals, that mineral may go up in the food, but it can push out even more of those because it's now way unbalancing the soil. So that the food has less of the others, because these were the key ones just to make it grow. And so it looks like food, but as I say, when you taste it, it's not there. Some of these were 21% magnesium less, Calcium, 15% less. Iron, 29% less in 2002 over 1940. And as I say, 1940 was already deficient. Copper, 50% less. Zinc, 55% less. Both extremely important. Copper to keep your blood vessels from forming an aneurysm and blowing out, to make them sturdy, and to cause other things to happen that need to be built. That copper is very important, like hemoglobin and things of that nature in your body. And zinc, which is extremely important for immune system, adrenal function, hormone function, insulin production. It's a few kind of necessary things in the body. So those all even are more or less than what was back then, which was already deficient. So I've just given you some ideas. Now you can answer your own question. Do we need to supplement? If it's not in the soil, where are we going to get it? Unless you can figure out a miraculous way of getting a piece of worthless food suddenly full of minerals, I don't know where you're going to get it. Now, I have a bunch of these, but there's no sense going through all these papers about the importance. And these are, here's a whole list of deficiency symptoms. If you don't have this, what does it do in your body? We're not going to take the time to do all that because we're running low on time as it is. Here's a whole series of articles done. These are scientific articles. Relevance, sensuality, and toxicity of trace elements in human health. Now, this is in general, big study. Metals like manganese, iron, copper, zinc, and so forth. Are they necessary? And of course, they end up saying, yes, they are. The influence of biological and environmental factors on the metallothionein concentration in the blood. Again, having to do with the elements. And protective effects of selenium against cadmium-induced hematological disturbances, immunosuppressive oxidative stress, and hepatorenal damage. And they did a lot of studies with rats and showed what happened if you don't have selenium. And that's been known for a long time. No selenium, iodine doesn't work right, your thyroid doesn't work right. You're more inclined to fibrocystic breasts and ovarian cysts. You're more inclined to breast cancer and so forth. They've known all this for a long time. So I came from northern Ohio to Florida many years ago. And interestingly, they had found that the soil there was totally depleted of selenium. And so guess what? They fed mixed selenium in with the feed for the animals because they didn't want sick animals, but guess what? They never bothered to mention it to humans. That the reason there's more cancer in this area is because there's no selenium in the soil, and so all the people who are eating food growing here are not getting the selenium. Copper-modulated neurological disorder, visions into myotrophic lateral sclerosis, Alzheimer's, and Menkes disease. Zinc, homeostasis, and immunosenescence. In other words, your immune system doesn't work without zinc. Role of selenium in human conception and pregnancy. Hepatoprotective and antifibrotic effects of molybdenum, and so forth, and on bile duct ligands. Comparative angioprotective effects of magnesium compounds. I mean, but do you know what the problem is? They don't even teach this in medical school. You know what they do? Well, here's a low sodium diet. Here's a diet for hypertension. Here's a diet for diabetes. And it's a standard written diet form, and that has been in time past. Now, it's possible that some medical schools are starting to add a little bit more because they may not want the doctors to look too ignorant when they come out, that their patients come in knowing more about nutrition and health than they do. But it's there. The studies have done. And here's studies on mineral depletion. Here's a big one on metal ions in biological systems. Metal ions play essential roles in about 1/3 of enzymes. I've said that before. They're cofactors with a lot of the enzymes and also in making the enzymes. And so if you don't have them, guess what? You're going to be deficient in enzymes. You're deficient in enzymes and things don't work. Remember what enzymes do in the body? They cause things to come together or break apart. like breaking down whatever you put in your stomach, and also rebuilding the body, and breaking down poisonous substances that get in your body. All those things require enzymes, and enzymes require energy to make, and cofactors like minerals to go with it. So you can't build those. So if you're missing an important enzyme, then you're either not going to be able to break something down, or you're not going to be able to put something together. And here's a whole list of signs of mineral deficiencies: acne, anemia, arthritis, asthma, brittle nails, birth defects, cancer, candida, cardiovascular diseases, chronic fatigue, constipation, cramps, depression, diabetes, degenerative or digestive problems, eczema, edema, goiter, hair loss, graying hair, hyperactivity, hypothermia, immune system weakness, impotence, infertility, liver dysfunction, blood sugar problems, memory loss, muscular weakness, dystrophy and cystic fibrosis, nervousness, osteoporosis, PMS, receding gums, periodontitis. Now, dentists probably don't want you to know that, because they have a lot of treatments for that are very profitable. And I'm not picking on dentists, that's the way they're trained. Sexual dysfunction and wrinkles and sagging skin. Now, some people, that might get their attention. But this is all stuff that's come out of studies that if they're deficient, here's what can happen. Now, do we need supplements? Well, if there's no minerals and there's no nutrients to any great degree in our food, you answer that question for yourself. Okay, so now I think that we have kind of established the point that maybe we might want to take some supplements. Okay. Now, if that's the case, then what do we take? And I kind of have gotten into that a little bit, talking about the synthetic vitamins. And incidentally, there is now a PDR on vitamins and minerals put out by the same company that puts out the drug PDR, and also one on herbs, and they call it herbal medicine. So it's nutritional medicine, herbal medicine, and pharmaceutical medicine, all big PDRs put out by the same company. Now, it's out there, the information's there, but guess what? They don't train them in school for it, so what happens? And, of course, we skirt around all this because people don't want to hear it. People don't want to know they got to change their diet. They don't want to know they got to look for good food. They don't want to know that they have to learn something about food and about nutrients if they want to have some health. What do? They rely on getting a drug for every symptom that comes along and hope for the best. I mean, it's an interesting game to play, but it's your body at risk and it's your choice, getting back to what I said earlier. Sustainable farming systems and nutrient-dense food. Now, here's an interesting comment that I ran into, because, the FDA and the Department of Agriculture, they're supposed to be kind of looking out for a lot of this stuff. And so here's something put out by this Nutrition Security Institute called Human Health, Nutritional Quality of Harvested Food and Sustainable Farming Systems. And they quote U.S. Senate, this one that we talked about back in 1936, how important it is. This was put out in 2006. But here's what they said that's happening today. Much of our agricultural soils have been exhausted of the minerals and organic material needed to grow nutritious food. Well, I think we're kind of establishing that. Exhausted soils, depleted of critical minerals, cannot grow healthy, nutrient-rich crops. I mean, you don't have to be Albert Einstein to know that. Crops require minerals and organic materials to transform nutrients into forms that plants can use for growth. Food growth in nutrient-deficient soil lacks the nutrients needed to keep people healthy. Ooh. Anyhow, they said the big problem is that the USDA standards today for growing are limited to size, shape, and color. None of the current USDA standards address nutritional values. Organic industry standards address production methods that reduce toxicity and avoid the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Neither the USDA nor organic industry standards address the nutritional quality of food. So you can get, as I mentioned before, a USDA government certified organic piece of food, and it can be flat with no nutrients. But it looks like food. You know, it looks like a piece of spinach or a piece of kale, or it looks like a nectarine or an orange or an apple or whatever, but all you have to do is taste it and you know right away what you have. Okay, I don't have time to cover all this. This was another paper put out called The Nutrient Depletion of Our Foods. And anyhow, they just said the convenience of modern living incur many trade-offs when it comes to eating a healthy diet. Yeah, well, it's easier to go down to the fast food place and get some imitation food than it is to go and try to find a source of some good food. Most of us are simply unaware of our level of exposure to persistent environmental toxins through the foods we place daily on our table. Nor do we fully appreciate the degree to which the nutritional value of our food supply has been bludgeoned by our over-reliance on commercial, chemically based agriculture. The fact is, without fortified cereals, most of us would not even come close to meeting our daily nutritional requirements for vitamins, minerals, and trace elements. Less than 1/3 of North Americans eat the minimum recommended 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. Now we find that even if a person accidentally does eat a vegetable, it doesn't have nearly the nutrition that nature intended. So, we're down to the fact of the supplements. Now, as I mentioned, there's basically 3 sources of supplements. And I'll just throw this one last. This came from the University of California, Berkeley. And they did a big study in 2002. It was posted, dietary supplements make old rats youthful and may help rejuvenate aging humans, according to UC Berkeley study. Wow. What great stuff. Big discovery. Okay, so natural versus synthetic vitamins. Well, there's 3 kinds of vitamins. Basically, there's totally synthetic. That's what the pharmaceuticals manufacture, the synthetic chemicals that are one of the factors in many cases, like vitamin E, for example, is a whole group, it's a complex of things as it's found in nature. They separate one factor out, and then it's poor, and for example, there's 4 major components alone, plus a whole group of supporting things, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta fractions. Okay, so the normal pharmaceutical supplement has 1, the alpha fraction, but it is synthetic and it is listed as D-L-tocopherol, which means dextrolevo, which means some of the molecules are turned to the left, some are turned to the right, and both of those are not good. One of them is and one isn't. But that's only a fraction. That's not even the whole vitamin E. So a lot of their studies are done using this, and when they tried to compare it to one done on cardiovascular health and true vitamin E, they used the synthetic to test, and they said, well, we don't see that it does much different. Well, of course it didn't, because they didn't use the same thing in the study that was used originally. So they are not all the same by a long way. And the second thing you can do is, of course, you can isolate from food or a food source a single vitamin, which is another thing that's done. And for years, and I don't know if it's still the case, but most of the vitamin E was manufactured by Eastman Kodak, the photographic company. And they took the wheat germ and they put it through a process. And to process it means already it's not the same, because it's exposed to certain chemicals to extract it, and sometimes certain toxic metals like nickel in high levels to act as a catalyst to make things happen. And if it's not nickel, it could be some other metal. But some metal could be used as a catalyst, because in chemistry, as I mentioned, even in the body, certain elements are necessary to do certain things. So they make this huge vat of this E. So the better form of it, the non-esterified E of the four peripherals, come out at the top of this big vat. As you go down to different layers, at the bottom is the cheapest. So you pay more money for the non-esterified mixed tocopherols from the top of the vat, and by the time you get down to the bottom, you have only D-tocopherol, which is one tiny fraction. So obviously you're not going to get the effect, but you're going to pay a lot less money. Now, I mentioned before that I know this biochemist who worked for the Linus Pauling Institute for a long time. He's a professor, or was a professor of biochemistry for years, and now he's in private research for health and nutrition. And on one occasion, they decided to go out and buy these cheap vitamins, because bottom line is, if you put almost nothing in it, you could sell it cheap. And so this vitamin E fraction was used, the DL-tocopherol, in a very inexpensive brand, or brands. Actually, they went out and pulled several of them off the shelf, and regular stores bought them, went back to the lab and analyzed them based on the label. So here they bring in vitamin E, is what it says on the label, and they're allowed to say that because of the way the government regulations are, that if it has some fraction of E in it, they can call it E. So it's DL-tocopherol, so we know it's synthetically made, and we don't know how much L or D is in there even, because they don't, if they do analyze it, they don't put it on the label. Okay, so they took it back to the lab and they measure it. And guess what? When they measure it, it says 400 units of DL-tocopherol on the label, but there's only 4 units. So here is something somebody buys for $3.99, $4.99, $5.99, and said, boy, well, I don't want to spend $20 or $30 for a bottle of this mixed tocopherols, or E complex. I can buy E for $3.99 or $4.99. So 4 units, 4 international units of DL-tocopherol, and guess what? The rest of the capsule is full of cheap vegetable oil. That's what you're buying. And that's pretty expensive, cheap vegetable oil, because it's worth almost nothing. So it's important that you know what you're getting. Now, as I say, first method is just to make synthetic vitamins, period. Just make synthetic molecules. Anymore you can synthesize almost any kind of molecule. Is it the same? I don't personally believe it is, because first of all, they're not found isolated in nature. They're found in complexes within food, and that's what your body does the best with. So in my mind, the synthetics are the worst possible choice. And if you can really tell it's synthetic if it says USP, government certified USP grade. Now that's a chemistry term, and USP means United States pharmaceutical grade. That means that the government has approved it to be put into people's bodies. But when they call it USP, that's what it is. It's a chemical. It's a chemical grade. So that you understand, when you get a bottle that says these are all the purest USP grade, you know that it's been processed and a lot of things have happened. And it certainly is going to be synthetic in nature. Okay, so the second group are those isolates that they take food and extract it from to get a single factor, like what's called vitamin C is the other big one that's on the market, but it's only ascorbic acid. There is a whole complex in nature of vitamin C. Now, I just happened to run across, there's something called paper chromatography, which is a way of analyzing the energetic quality of fruit, vegetable, herb. It doesn't matter what it is, or vitamin. And so it was developed many, many years ago. It comes out of anthroposophical medicine, out of Austria. Dr. Rudolf Steiner did tremendous work in biodynamic agriculture, which is how to grow healthy food, how to correct the soil and grow healthy food. Well, anyhow, paper chromatography is you take a liquid extract and put a drop in the center of a circular piece of porous type of paper, special paper, and as it sets, it migrates outward on that paper and separates into different layers depending on the atomic weight. Okay, so this is one of those studies where they took natural vitamin C from a plant versus ascorbic acid, which is what's mostly sold today as vitamin C. But they can call it that because that's one of the big factors in vitamin C, happens to be the ascorbic acid. So by law, they can call it ascorbic acid, even though there's a group of other factors that make it up. Bioflavonoid complexes, ascorbigen, tyrosinase, P factors, K factors, J factors, and then ascorbic acid. So that's what makes up real vitamin C complex. Okay, so when you take the real C complex and put on a paper chromatogram versus ascorbic acid, at the top of this, I'll let you see, this is the true vitamin C, and this is ascorbic acid. You can see the tremendous difference in those two. Now down at the bottom they did orange juice on this side from a fresh orange, and here is an orange drink. And you can see the difference in the constituencies of those from the paper chromatogram. And so that's one of the ways you can test. There's other things you can do, but we don't have time to do it now or talk about it. But the fact is that isolating single vitamins also involves processing, and processing also has a tendency to weaken or only take certain pieces out. So then these companies buy all these pieces, put them together into a supplement, and call it a multiple vitamin mineral. And so that's where they come from. So that is probably a little better because it at least came from natural sources than the purely synthetics. The third source is what are called whole food supplements, and true 100% whole food supplements come from food that's grown in good organic soil, and then it's cooled and dehydrated until it can be formed into a tablet to take. And that's a true whole food supplement. That has all the vitamins, minerals, nutrients in complex that normally in nature would be in food that we would eat that was grown in good soil. So that is the third type, probably more expensive, but it has all of the things in balance as they occur in nature, not in high levels because they're highly absorbable and highly utilizable, so you don't have to pour a lot in. You know, in chemistry there's something called the law of mass action, that the more you pour in, the more likely something can happen from it. So if you pour in large amounts of a cheap vitamin, yeah, your body's going to be forced to have to try to take some of it and do something with it. But in true 100% whole food nutrients, all the stuff is already there. Now, they can tell you on the label, after it's all put together, they can analyze it and say, well, we find this much of these different things, at least. Then you know what's in there, but it does not have all the processing done to it, because it never was overheated, it never killed the enzymes, it never destroyed anything, because a lot of things break down with heat, and it has no preservatives, no additives, no artificial coloring, no artificial flavoring. It's the real stuff. That is the one that will give you the most value. Now, if you paid $20 for a vitamin put together from extractions made from various food factors, you're going to have to, value-wise, not get as much value out of it. And see, I think there's another factor, it's an energetic quality that we don't have time to talk about, that will be missing from all these others because of the processing. It's like you wipe out certain factors in the process. Now, you still can call it a vitamin, but it's still missing a lot. Whether it's like C or E that are complexes that you don't get the complex or whatever. So there's a lot out there about all that. The problem is they're not going to talk about it. And so different people come up with some ideas, and there's some steps to identify the ingredients of a label. First of all, 100% natural. Natural alone means nothing, because if it's even 10% from some natural source to begin with, even if it's processed to death, they can still call it natural. And so that can mean nothing. Organic, I have questions about anymore because of the latitude in the use of the term. The food still could be truly organic grown, which is a process of growing, but be grown in soil that has no nutrients, so it's going to still be nutrient deficient. Now, also, you should find on the label food source. What kind of foods does it come from? And you should be able to identify whole foods in the ingredient list. Things like kale, broccoli, various types of actual plants. And look for salt forms on the label. A synthetic added to supplements for increasing the stability of the vitamin and mineral. Some of the salt forms to look for. In other words, the vitamin can be made into a salt form like acetate, bitartrate, chloride, gluconate, hydrochloride, nitrate, and succinate. So when you see that, it'll say vitamin E, then on the side it'll say succinate. Okay. If it says succinate, it's just a chemical form. And learn how to read the product's label by looking for keywords that indicate the supplement is synthetic. Words that end in the IDE or ATE indicate that it contains salt forms, which are synthetics. And of course, the DLs are a problem. And I've mentioned before, we're out of time, I've mentioned before that fatty acids have been very deceptive, and we talked about the fish oil versus natural plant oils for true omega-3s and omega-6s. I was able to get away from that because everybody was deceived, including me, back along the way, that fish oil was omega-3, omega-6. It starts out in a fish's body as omega-3 and omega-6, but the fish's chemistry changes it into EPA and DHA, which are derivatives. They are not omega-3, omega-6. And so consequently, they lied and said it was those omegas, and everybody thinks they're taking omegas when they take the fish oil. The fact is that it's a derivative, and I mentioned before it takes about 17 pounds of fish for each capsule to extract and concentrate these derivatives into a concentrated form that now acts like a drug in your body. For example, it acts much like cortisol, so it'll shut down inflammation, it'll shut down a lot of things, because it actually mimics the cortisol products in the body, but it has adverse effects. And now even regular medicine, New England Journal of Medicine, has published that what they originally thought was going to happen, it's not happening. It's not helping the brain nervous system, and it's not doing other things, and it can be creating a lot of skin problems because those derivatives in the skin are toxic to the skin. Unfortunately, or even too much of the wrong oil, period. Fatty acids are very important, but they're also important in balance. So I mentioned that already in another broadcast, but I thought I better throw it in since we're talking about all these supplementation. Now, all the studies indicate that between 90 to 100%, probably 90-some% of the vitamins on the market are going to be synthetic. So you really need to do your shopping if you want to do it right. I mean, you want to get your value out of it. You want something that's really going to make you healthy. You don't want something that you're just taking. So we've kind of established a necessity, and we have also established that it's not in the food, which is where it should be, and that most supplements must have them for health and to prevent illness. I mean, even the World Health Organization's expert panel said that. If you want to stop chronic disease, put healthy things in your body. And so the last question is what kind, and that's what we've just been talking about. So we've expended our time. I hope that I've given you enough information that puts you on your way, because as I say, you don't have to take it because I said it. I mentioned before a couple books, Empty Harvest, done several years ago back in the 90s by Dr. Bernard Jensen and Mark Anderson. And it's it's all about the fact that our food is missing stuff in it. And another one, why do I need whole food supplements, which is what we've been talking about, is whole food supplements written by a nutritionist. What everyone must know about the vitamins they're taking, and it kind of gives you some basic information. It's not the whole story, but it's helpful. Otherwise, there's Google, and with Google you can search and search. Every week I do probably anywhere from several dozen to a couple of hundred searches on information, and I've gotten pretty good at finding what I'm looking for. Sometimes I have to go to New Zealand, Australia, which true organic and health and so forth has been growing tremendously in the last several years. Organic farming, true organic farming, and correcting the soil. And they are so missionary about it, some of the growers there, that a group of them went to Africa in an area where the people were hardly able to get enough out of the ground to meet their basic nutritional needs, and showed them how to grow high amounts of nutritious food to the point that they not only have more than enough to eat, they're able to sell it and make some money at the same time, which of course beats up the concept that the chemical industry has been selling for ages, that you cannot grow enough good stuff organically to sustain, therefore we have to have pesticides and artificial fertilizers. So I hope I'm provoking you just a little bit to go out and start looking. It's your life, it's in your hands, and it's your choice. Now, if you choose to go the way you've gone, that's fine with me. I mean, it bothers me that someone would do that to themselves, but on the other hand, this is the land of the free to the degree that it is, and I know that there's those people who would like to make a law for everything to restrict you to their profit under the guise of doing it for your best interest. Anyhow, until our next broadcast, now it's going, at this point, unless something changes, we're going back to the immunization issue again. I want to present, a while back when the flu thing was big this last year, I did some material on immunization, but I want to take it a step further, and I want to really get you into the whole thing and make some sources available that you can go look for yourself. Again, don't take my ideas and my position. It's up to you. It's your body and your health, and if you choose to do it because you're informed and you're willing to risk whatever the risk might be. And if you don't want to take them, then have the right to take them with whatever risk, if any, that might incur. Otherwise, until our next broadcast, go to our website and give us your comments, questions, critiques, whatever. It doesn't bother me if you disagree. That's perfectly fine. I'm giving you information that I feel, after 40 years of study and research and working with people clinically, is pertinent material. If you disagree or you choose not to accept it, that's perfectly all right, and it's your choice. But until our next broadcast, be healthy.